Now on the Amped Up to 11 podcast, Scott Odom, a true testament to the power of resilience and determination. At just 14 years old, Scott faced a life-altering challenge when he lost his leg to cancer. Despite this daunting obstacle, he refused to let it define his future. Instead, Scott channeled his passion for basketball into a remarkable career as a professional amputee athlete. In this episode, Scott shares his personal experiences from the moment he learned about his amputation through his rigorous recovery to the triumphant return to the basketball court. We'll explore his transition into adaptive sports and a profound impact of his charity called Amputee Basketball Invigorated. Scott's story is one of overcoming adversity, achieving greatness, and giving back to the community. Scott Odom, welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
So good to see you. I so appreciate you being here in the morning.
Of course, man.
We're doing these early morning tapings now. We got to make sure we get this out of the way before we get on with our day.
There we go.
So thank you very much. And I've spent probably the last 3 or 4 days with show prep on you, and it's extraordinary story. I mean, what you've done with your amputation and how you've, transcended into some of the spaces that you have been in and now are currently. It's just phenomenal and very inspirational for someone like myself, an amputee of, going into my 7th year. I think about you specifically in regards to the age that you faced an amputation, 14 years old. I think of myself in that particular age, I kind of felt I was pretty self-aware at that point. I mean, you're still a kid, but you're sort of getting into that young adult space, and you're developing dreams and developing those ideas about what you want to do, and you're trying to be cool, and all of that stuff, right, that goes at that particular age. And then the juggernaut arrives, right? Cancer. What's going on, right? So if you could describe your 14-year-old self at that time, what would be the narrative in that situation? How would you describe what you were processing as a 14-year-old Scott Odom?
Yeah, I mean, right before I got diagnosed, I was heavy into sports. So that summer I just finished up an all-stars in baseball, about to transition into high school. And so I had high school coaches and all this looking at us, talking to us, so there was talks about me possibly, going pretty far in baseball because that was my sport that I excelled most at was baseball. And then just to stay active, I was always involved in a sport. So soon as that ended, 2-a-days for high school was starting, and I was transitioning to go into high school as a freshman.
Yeah.
And at this time, my knee was just really hurting a lot. But it's been hurting since I was 10. It's been bothering me for that long. And I was so determined and so I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to be a professional athlete. That was my dream. Nobody was going to tell me that just wasn't an option. That was all I was focused on. And so going into high school was that next step of, getting closer to that goal.
Yeah.
But I always had knee pain, and, doctors would tell me it was just pulled ligaments, growing too fast, growing pain. So I was like, cool, I can go back playing. And then I think it was the second to last game or the last game of All-Stars in baseball, my knee gave out on me. And that was the first time it ever gave out. I hit it deep into center field, left center. So I was turning second to try to get a triple. And when I touched the bag second on second base, my knee just buckled and I fell. And then in my mind, I'm like, man, I tore something, or, I'm done. Like, so I was more upset about that, and my mom came to the dugout and I was like, yeah, we got to go to the doctor. I think I tore something. That was in my mind. And so through the MRI, he said he saw a cloud around my knee, didn't really like, um, so he wanted me to have an MRI done. So in my mind, 14, it's not a big deal. I'll have surgery, I'll milk it, be out a little bit, and then I'll go back, at least for baseball season. I can miss football. I wasn't a big kid. So football, I was just doing it just to do it, honestly, just to be active. And then during that time from the MRI to the results, like I was still in 2-a-days in football practice. I couldn't run full speed because the pain was so bad, but I didn't say anything. I just kind of pushed through it.
Yeah, you toughed
And
it out.
The coaches knew me from baseball and all that, so they knew I could run faster than what I was. So they thought I wasn't giving it my all, so they were making me run more, like almost,
Oh wow.
thinking I was just kind of playing around, which finally went home and I had tears in my eyes at that time. I was like, my knee is just killing me. Like I can't do it. And so first day of high school, I have like 2 classes and then I come out of my second period and I see my mom down the hallway and I'm like, what is she like? I was more embarrassed. Like, what was my mom doing at high school?
Yeah,
Like,
why
supposed to
are
be,
you
like
here?
you said, the cool kid and all
That's
that.
like
I was
our
like, oh my God,
our
it's so
worst
embarrassing.
nightmare at that age. Like, why is
Yeah.
that's when worlds collide, right? Your parents are
Yeah.
at your school. Like, this doesn't compute
The
for
very
me.
first day of high school. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Oh no.
But I could look at her face, like me and my mom, we can look at each other and kind of know something's up. So she's like, your results are back. They want to see you like now, today. So, okay, I was like, okay. And so in the back of my mind, again, I've really torn something. That's what I've convinced myself of. And we go see this knee specialist. And we're like the only ones in the waiting room. It's taking forever. So I'm getting impatient because I'm like, just want to go back to practice. Like, let's go. And then they finally call us in. They put all the images up on the board and she's giving all this big doctor lingo. And I'm just like, just tell me when I'm having surgery is what I'm thinking. Like I tore it or whatever. How long am I going to be out?
Yeah. When are you going to fix this?
And then the next words out of her mouth was, I'm 100% convinced or certain that you have osteosarcoma. And me and my mom look at each other like, what is that? And then she says, cancer. And at first it didn't hit me, like being 14, like I was like, there's no way a 14-year-old kid could have cancer. Like I'm healthy, I'm active, I take care of myself. Like there's no way I have cancer.
Yeah.
And then she's like, this is pretty bad. Like it's been in your leg for at least 2 years by looking how it is on the MRI. And I see my mom getting upset. So I asked my mom to leave the room so I could ask the doctor a question. So my mom walks out and then I asked the doctor straight up, I'm like, well, how bad is this cancer? Like, is it a bad kind or is it something that's no big deal? You can take it out. I'll be back playing. And she's like, if we don't do anything now and you don't do treatment within the next year, you'll die for sure because of how bad this is. And then that's when it hit me. Like I was just, my whole world just kind of crumbled. I thought sports was over. I thought I was going to die. Like I was just thinking the worst of the worst at that time.
Given that you were so active, a really active kid, because that was going to be one of my other questions. Like, were you really active before? Because, at this point, I've watched, a considerable amount of video footage of you playing basketball. And of course, that as an amputee myself, I see that and I think, well, gosh, man, like you play full court. I mean, you move so naturally. Like there are moments when you're, driving on the court and you don't move like an amputee. There are those little glimpses of moments where you can see like you're favoring a leg, so to speak.
For sure. Yeah.
Because that's just and I and I can say that because I'm an amputee. I know what that
Yeah,
is.
no, definitely. Yeah.
I know the way that we adapt, right? But so often, if I'm not really looking specifically at your legs, there is nothing that would suggest that you're wearing a prosthesis, let alone above the knee, right?
Mhm.
So being such an active kid, having to digest that type of diagnosis, you know, at 14, not being a medical person, all of this is just sort of getting like dumped on you. Um, I would think there's had to be some feelings of like my body like betrayed me. Like it's like this betrayal. Like, why is my body doing this? Like you said, I'm I'm active. Like I'm healthy.
Yeah.
Like how
Yeah.
like the calculus doesn't work in that
Right.
situation. Cause so often, especially with chronic illness, because I've been there, um, you try to trace back like what did I do? Right? Because
Mhm.
I always go to that um sort of that like space of guilt, right?
Yeah,
What did I
for
do
sure.
wrong? Like, how did I do this to myself? And then you arrive at that place of, well, you didn't do anything wrong. It has nothing to
Right.
do with anything you did. This
Right.
is what being human is all about. We are these
Right.
imperfect creatures that can get sick, things can happen. Really what it comes down to as human beings, as spiritual people especially, what do we do with it, right? Where do we take it from
Right.
there? And I would think at that age, because you're not really young, it wasn't a congenital defect, it wasn't like you lost a limb as a baby, um, and because I lost my leg in my late 40s. I lived a considerable amount of life up until then. So that sort of creates a completely different perspective. But at 14, I would think, man, that's a rough time. I mean, freshman year in high school, I remember being pretty insecure as a
Oh, for
freshman.
sure. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Most
then,
definitely.
right, like factor in oh yeah, and you're gonna die, right? If you don't fix this. Oh,
Mhm.
and what did that look like? Was it we have to amputate, or was it a series of surgeries? What was the treatment plan at that point?
Yeah, so that next day they did a biopsy to confirm it, which it was cancer. And then that the day after that, they put a port in my chest. They actually put a double port because I was going to get a lot of extensive chemo. So chemo was like, I mean, within a week I was already in the hospital taking chemo.
Yeah.
I did chemo for about 2 months straight. I lived in the hospital, and then the tumor was getting smaller, but it was spreading. So I initially had it on my knee, my patella, and then during that 2 months, I had two more spots on top of my knee. So they were really worried about it going to my lungs because if it spreads to your lungs, it's pretty
Yeah.
even harder to treat.
Yeah.
Um, so my doctor actually came to me when I was doing I think it was a follow up visit or something to check my blood work and all that. He's like, I normally don't do this. He said, but you're an active young kid. And he's like, I feel like you need to have a say in this decision. He's like, we can go two routes with the surgery. We can do a limb salvage surgery, which we would take the tumor out, take all your bones out, basically your tibia, your femur, and all that, replace it with metal rods. We'd save your leg, but you would be limited activity wise. We'd have to have do surgery in your other leg as you grow to, growth spurts and all that. He said, or the other option would be amputation. And that was the first time I ever heard that word amputation.
Yeah.
And I was like, what does that mean? And he's like, well, we would basically go above where the tumor's at and cut your leg off. And then you would use a prosthesis to walk and all that stuff. And he was like, you can jump out of a plane. You can be as active as you want to be, which I would never jump out of a plane because that's just not, even if I had two legs, I wouldn't do it.
I've done it
But
twice.
more power to you. I couldn't do But in my mind, I was hearing sports and no sports. And then
Yeah.
I was hearing lose my life or lose my leg.
Yeah.
So right then I knew, let's amputate. But I didn't say that out loud because my mom was in the room.
Yeah.
And I could tell it was upsetting her a lot.
Yeah.
But for whatever reason, I just had a peace, like just cut it off, like just be done with it. Like I don't want to take the chance of them cutting it out and they don't get it all or whatever. Like just go above it, cut it off, and then I'll figure
But
the rest
what,
out
I mean,
when I get to it.
incredibly evolved at that age to know. And I'm sure there was something like intuitive about it. You know, as humans, we kind of like listen to our gut a little bit, right? There's always that voice
Right.
in our
For
heads.
sure. Yeah.
And when I was young, I actually, and I can admit this now because I'm older, when I was young, I never listened to that voice. Like when you're going
Yeah.
to do something you shouldn't, and that
Right.
voice is
Exactly.
saying, "Nah, not a good idea, man." And you just
Yeah.
do
You
it
still do
anyway.
it. Yeah. For sure.
Well, now that I'm older, I am so connected to my intuition. The second I get even a whiff of not a good, I'm like, I'm out.
Yeah. I'm
Nope.
done. I'm too old for this. Yeah. Exactly.
But at that age, there must have been something that was telling you, and we can laugh now and we can reflect on it now because of your mobility. Your mobility is phenomenal. So,
Thank you.
you look at that and say at that age to go, yeah, let's do this. Let's take it. This does not serve me anymore. The quicker path to glory is going to be a prosthesis. The adaptation piece, the fact that I will traverse this in some way is going to happen a lot sooner. Getting back to sports, getting back to being active. If I do this, then if I try to kind of cobble some form of a leg back together and I'm still a young person and I'm growing and it's going to be it's just I'm never going to reach that fullest potential um as sort of this, kind of broken kind of person. Um
Right.
that was incredibly insightful. And how did that materialize with your mom? Was it something that she discussed with the doctors, or was that something that you had to say, "Hey, mom, this is what I think is best"?
Uh, yeah, it was definitely me. So we leave that appointment, and it was probably the quietest ride home.
Yeah.
I didn't say anything. She didn't say anything. And then we get home, and it's still like kind of awkward. And I just say, "Why don't you write down what you want me to do, and then I'll write down what I want to do, and we'll see. If we are agreeing. If not, then we'll talk about it."
Yeah.
So we finally decided, and my mom and dad were, they wrote down what they wanted, and so like on 3, we turned it over, and mine said, "Cut it off," and theirs said, "Save it." And when they saw that I wanted to cut it off, of course, they break down. Because I
Wow.
mean, no parent wants to see their child lose a limb, and I
Sure.
mean, it's a whole new world, and, like, at that time, 25 whatever years ago, like, you just didn't see amputees, you just didn't see active ones or anything like that.
You're right.
And so
We weren't perceived as the powerful people that we are back then.
no, not at all. And so I immediately when I saw that, I was like, for whatever reason, I was like, I can't explain it right now, but I know this is what I have to do. I'm at peace with it. I'm okay with it. I don't want y'all to be upset. I just need support. Like, and once they heard me verbalize that, like, I'm okay with this. Like, I'd rather be here than have 2 legs and, not be here,
Yeah.
in a sense. So I was like, I don't know what this prosthesis or amputee world is,
Yeah.
but I'll figure it out. Like, I don't know. So once we had that conversation, they were like, all right, let's do this. And so the doctor, they were going to do another MRI just to confirm everything. And then they found 2 more spots on top of my hip. And so they were like, well, you have no choice. We have to take your whole leg, like your whole hip. And we're just like devastated because I'm like, we just made this difficult decision, life changing decision, but now I have no decision. So they're
Yeah.
like, well, let's do a biopsy the next day just to confirm it. And I wake up from the biopsy and my mom's bawling, like crying. And I'm like, oh, great, more bad news. And she's like, they never did the biopsy. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I just woke up from anesthesia.
Yeah.
And apparently, I mean, God had an angel in that room for me, because as soon as they put me under, there was a tech or somebody in that surgical room, and they had my MRI results up on that way they could know where to do the biopsy at. And one of them noticed that uh, the numbers were backwards or upside down. So when they flipped it over, it was the two same spots on top of my knee. I never had any spots on my hip. They just
Oh,
initially read it upside down.
oh boy.
And yeah, and so I learned that coming up, and me and my mom are just thankful, like, oh, no more cancer. But my dad was ready to kill somebody just because of what we were going through. But I'm just thankful they caught it, and they were like, we'll give you like a 2-week break. And I was like, just put me back under and just cut it off. Like, I just want to be done with this.
Wow.
So I think a few days after that, I had the amputation.
Wow. So in that moment, you're like, it's time.
Yeah, I was like, no more of these like hoping or mess ups. Like, if we know that's it, if I've made the decision, let's just do it.
Yeah. And do you feel like in your life with a lot of your decisions that you've made, do you feel like, I mean, once I'm decided, like that's it. Let's do it.
Um, I mean, for the most part, I think the more I've tried to do, especially everything that I've done, like not that I question a lot of stuff, but I'm always like, I beat myself up a lot, I guess, and my own
Yeah.
worst critic in a sense.
Yeah.
So I'm more harder on myself because I want to be like, especially what I do for all these kids, like I want to do as much as I can for them because I've been in their situation.
Sure.
So I probably think about it and visualize it in my head for months before, I'm actually doing it.
Yeah.
And then when it's done, that day, like I'm super down because I'm like, man, it could have went this way. We should have done this. But everybody's super grateful and super nice. But in my mind, I'm like, I
Yeah,
don't know. I
I
just have
tend
a
to go to
bigger
that.
vision.
Yeah, I tend to go to that space too. I think when you live your life in a way that you see your life's path as an exercise in serving, when you bring yourself to that sort of idea that so much of my happiness and the forward movement in my life is when I feel like I am serving. And that could be the amputee community, that could be my friends, my family, my creative endeavors, that could be my work, my professional life. When I am serving, I tend, like you're saying, there's a lot of sort of hyper processing that goes on because you want
Hmm.
to bring your best self to something. And
Right.
it doesn't take, all that much research to know about you that you obviously pursue perfection. And, I've watched, hours, literally like hours of you just, shooting around on a court, right? Multiple videos. And I always go back to that idea that I once heard when I was young. And someone said, if you really want to get good at something, you got to put in 10,000 hours. It's just what
Oh, most definitely.
it's just what it takes. If you want to become
Yeah.
proficient at something, if you want to be respected and develop a skill on a high level, you have to keep in mind 10,000 hours. It's just how it
Yeah.
is. Nobody is
Yeah.
just given these gifts, right?
Right. Yeah.
Michael Jordan, didn't become who he was because, they just gave him a basketball and suddenly he was just amazing. Um,
Exactly.
he talks very often about his success was built on a mountain of failure, literally.
Right.
And I think that's an important lesson, especially for young people. But I'm the same way in terms of my critical nature because I'll even talking about the podcast, I'll go back and look at things and I think, Oh my gosh, this is like amateur hour. Like, what on earth?
Uh,
Like, what on earth are we
I
doing?
do the same thing. Yeah, I do the same thing. Don't feel bad.
I know, it's crazy. And I'll tell my girlfriend Sarah, I'm like, did you see that? And she's like, no, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, it's fine. Like,
Yeah, it's very hard for me to take compliments
yeah,
because yeah,
exactly.
I don't see it.
I
Yeah.
know, totally. I want to talk about AMP1 basketball, which talking about that. This is something that has kind of been in my orbit, for a while as an amputee, because it
Hmm.
it it tends to fall in and out of my, let's call it, my algorithm, right?
Hmm.
Because it's this very significant league of stand up basketball. And tell me about how all that came about, and how long after your amputation did that materialize?
Yeah, so lost my leg when I was 14, and then I played baseball in high school. I went back and pitched with my prosthesis, but I mean, once high school ended, I knew like my dream of playing college sports was pretty much done, like over, because nobody was going to take me seriously as an athlete. So there was about year or two where I was pretty down. I didn't know what I was going to do. I kind of reached out to my prosthetist and stuff and like, hey, how can I be active as an amputee? What kind of sports are there? And of course, I was always pushed the Paralympics and track and field and all that, which I never did it. I just wasn't a that's just not me. I just don't have that in me.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, what about basketball? And they're like, well, there's wheelchair basketball. And I was like, well, that's cool. Like, you know, but I had to teach myself how to run, all this stuff. Like, I don't want to just sit in a wheelchair and play when I can run and I'm playing against able bodies back at home all the time. So nothing against wheelchair basketball. It's a very cool, hard sport. I
Yeah.
just for whatever reason, I just want to play stand up. How come there's not a stand up thing out there? And I was told, it was too hard to do. Not enough amputees would do it. There was just a lot of negative around it. And I was probably 19 at this time, 20. So I was like, okay. And then my prosthetist, I think, got tired of me talking about it. Like, how come they don't do stand up? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Like, they want to sell me a knee, sell me a foot, but then they want me to sit in a wheelchair and play basketball. Like, it doesn't make sense.
Right.
And she's like, well, you just need to start it. You just need to do it if this is what you want to do. So I was like, all right, fine, I will.
Yep.
And so
Good
I
advice.
made I made a bunch of these flyers, like stand-up basketball flyers, and I probably made over 1,000 of them. I mailed them out all over the country to like Oprah, Mark Cuban, the NBA. I was just Googling and finding all these addresses to mail this flyer out, just
Yeah.
trying to get somebody to like show interest in it and maybe want to help me out.
Yeah. Put some energy behind it.
So I mailed out like I said, literally 1,000 of them, and I got one response from the NBA. It was a marketing guy or somebody, and when I saw that email, I was like, "Oh man, this is it! Like, this is perfect."
Yeah.
And the guy
NBA,
was
that's a
like,
big
"Oh,
deal.
yeah," and he was like, "Oh, this sounds cool, but have you looked into wheelchair basketball?" And I was just like, "Oh
Oh
my
man.
gosh, dude! Like, did you not read the flyer?" So I just felt like it was a dead end. Like I felt people weren't really hearing me out. So I was like, well, if you're not hearing me out, you need to see what I'm talking about. Maybe it's a visual thing. So that's
Yeah.
when I posted the video of me just shooting in my backyard, which I would do every day for hours at a time.
Yeah.
My dad would put a floodlight up because I could stay out there till like 2 a.m. and just shoot, shoot, shoot. Because that's my therapy. It's what I like to do. I kind of zone out when I'm out there. And when I posted that video, I immediately got responses from other amputees, from kind of all over the country, like
Yeah.
Utah, New York, Cali. And there was a guy in Utah that he first connected with me, and he said, "Hey, I've been kind of like me, kind of looking for something like this. Are you starting something? What's going on?" And so I said, "Yeah, man, I would love to start something." And so we kind of were talking for a while, and then we said, "Hey, I got guys kind of all over the country, but let's just do this on our own. Like,
Yeah. How do you
I
bring it
don't
all
think we're gonna
together?
I don't think we're gonna get the support we're looking for, so let's just, do it." And so I drove from Texas to Cali to meet up with him and another amputee just to play basketball on a weekend. And then we contacted the news station there, and they came and did a story on us about what we were trying to like get stand-up basketball started. So we kind of did that for, 6 months to a year, I guess, where I drove down to Austin. We played in a 3-on-3 tournament against able bodies and just tried to get some exposure, whatever media stuff. And then the guy in Utah, he had a connection with Freedom at the time because that's where they did a lot of their testing and stuff. And so we end up getting a meeting with the marketing lady through Freedom. And I flew out on my own to Irvine, where they were based out of. And we had a meeting with her and told her our idea, what we would like to do, like just something new, something different, like, and they showed interest. And so they kind of helped us out. So we would go, they would help get us to like New York or wherever, and we would like do these games against these schools, against like the teachers or high school kids or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But at the same time, do like a little talk.
Yeah, it's like an
with that.
exhibition that was sort of like for inspiration.
Yeah, it was basically just to show that, amputees, what they're capable of, and it had the message of, never giving up. We all had a unique story we would share, and so overcoming adversity and all that stuff. So it was a lot of stuff that was really cool to me. But at that same time, I was meeting a kid at all these places we were going, and that would like stick with me. So like one kid had a physical disability, and he was really touched by what we were doing. So all that kind of stuck with me after I would leave, a trip. I would like, man, like I had a desire to do more, I guess. I didn't want to just go play basketball and kind of like, hey, look what I can do. Or
yeah, you saw
the competitive.
the impact of what displaying that. So you put yourself in that space, and then you saw what was sort of like coming back, what was rebounding, so to speak.
Right.
Was this
Right. And we were kind of doing it, I would say we wanted to kind of create a league at that time, have a stand-up amputee basketball league and have, be competitive and all that stuff, which at that time, me being a young 20-year-old, like, yeah, let's do this. Let's show people. But meeting these kids, I was falling back like, man, like, I don't know. I had a really pull on my heart. Like, I don't know if I want to like w- me just going out there and say, hey, look at me. Like, I felt very uncomfortable the more and more I did it. And so I wanted to, there was part of me that was like, I don't think I want to do this. And so me and the guy that kind of co-founded it, we just had different visions at that time.
Yeah.
We initially were wanting to do the league, but I was kind of wanting to go this way. And so I said, hey man, like, I think everybody wants to do that. Like, I'm going to back off. I think I'm going to, even though I kind of co-founded it and I was the AMP1 guy at that time and all that stuff,
Yeah.
I just said, hey man, like, y'all do y'all's thing. Like, I think I'm going to go this route and more nonprofit route. I just wanted to like, I have a really like connection with kids.
Well,
So I
sounds
wanted
like
to
he
give
wanted to
back.
serve.
Yeah, and so when I left, one other guy left with me, and then we end up co-founding ABI, which
Yep.
is what I do now. And I mean, it's been a lot harder for sure doing the nonprofit stuff.
Yep.
Because when I was doing the AMP1 stuff, like I was flown all over the country, flown to Germany. I got to be in a TV show. I got to be in all these articles. So a lot of opportunities that I thought maybe would transition over to helping with the nonprofit, but it's been complete opposite. But at the same time, like the purpose behind it, the impact we're making with these kids, these families going through like the worst case scenario.
Yeah.
Like it's been very impactful. So I'm grateful for that whole journey that I was on. Even though there were some rough patches on it, like very grateful for that time, but my heart changed and I was just like, this is what I want to do. Some people were cool with it. Some people not so much, which was, maybe understandable now that I'm older, but I had to make that decision.
Yeah, but it sounds like your journey and what you were discovering, with AMP1 was you were getting this tremendous amount of satisfaction in the way in which your story was affecting other people's lives, and you were creating this sort of light, this vibration that was helping others. And maybe AMP1 felt a little bit more like, I'm a rock star, and, there's this sort of this spotlight on me. And not to say that that's a bad thing, because it's not.
No, yeah.
To perform on that level, to show people your skill and your prowess as an athlete, all of that is very inspirational. Professional sports are built on that idea that we are entertained, we are engaged by these, fine-tuned athletes that do amazing things. So those are all worthwhile endeavors, but I really respect you for looking inward and saying, what is it that really resonates with me? What is the thing that I feel most connected to, which is helping others, inspiring others, giving people the energy and the resilience and all of these, touch points to better their lives. How can I make that happen? And to go into a charity space, you're not the first person to tell me it can be a rough go, because it's to be quite honest, it's not as glamorous, and
No.
it doesn't necessarily garnish endorsements and advertising dollars and all the other things that, let's say, that past life you were living would be bringing in. So it's a trade-off, right? It becomes, well, do I want to serve myself, or do I want to serve others? And I think it's a incredibly honorable and respectful choice. When we're talking about Amputee Basketball Invigorated, I love that. A worthwhile charity that creates events, creates, various fundraising efforts for, kids and people in need. I mean, what an incredible way to use your influence and your light. So much of this podcast is dedicated to basically shining a light on people like yourself, so that we can continue to build this community and continue to move people forward. Um, I mean, I get very uncomfortable myself. I went to the Amputee Coalition convention last summer, and being approached in a way, almost like I don't even know how to describe it. Almost like in almost like a celebrity like fashion.
Right.
It's bizarre to me.
It is. It is very, yeah.
Yeah. It's not something I gravitate towards. So much of doing this podcast, starting this podcast, because people, send me email and DM, and, they ask me these questions, and so much of it was started because I very much just wanted to connect with people like yourself. I wanted to engage in conversation. I wanted to learn more. And becoming an amputee was this, just whole new world. And how do you navigate this? And I think what I realized very early is that when you can connect with people in a similar situation, um, it just really improves your life. So in a lot of ways, I just had this curiosity about other amputees, other people with limb differences. And the byproduct of that was that I could, bring their stories to a bigger platform. And, fortunately, we've been lucky enough to continue this endeavor and keep putting it out there. The thing I was sort of curious about as well, in terms of, the prosthesis piece in your life, being an amputee as long as you have, how would you describe sort of the spectrum of technology that you've experienced? from the time of your amputation to now?
Yeah, I mean, it's night and day for sure. Just talking knee wise, I remember my first knee was like a Black Max 4-bar hydraulic knee. And so you could flip the lever in the back and have it in free swing if you wanted to, or you could have some hydraulic resistance, which I would constantly blow that out, just being an active kid.
Yeah.
So I always had it in free swing. So, I mean, I would fall all the time. And it was basically walking on like a door hinge. It was just that free of giving. And then, I'd say later on, the 3R80 came out, which was a hydraulic knee. And I remember when it first came out, I saw it in one, I think it was an In Motion magazine, and it promoted you could play basketball on this. And I was like, oh, basketball, like that's right up my alley. And so I remember contacting the rep from that company and said, hey, like y'all promote this to play basketball. Would you be interested in helping out with stand up basketball? They immediately took that basketball playing off their marketing stuff because they were like, again, pushing me to play wheelchair at that time just because this was 20 something years ago.
Yeah.
But having that 3R80, it had some resistance in the knee. So they gave me, it was, I mean, even like if you get something new, like a new foot, a new socket, there's some adjustments to get used to learning how it works and all that stuff. And so when I first heard about the C leg, I don't know when this was, but I remember it was like the ooh and the ah, like a computerized knee that could do this and that. And I was always told, "Oh, you're too active for those stuff. Like it's just not in the works for you." And they're really expensive at that time because it was something new. So I just rocked the hydraulic knee forever and ever. And then as more microprocessors were coming out, um, the first one that I did get was when we were teaming up with Freedom at that time for the AMP1 stuff. They came out with the Plie, and so that was kind of the first microprocessors that I had. So the first time I could feel more resistance, more stability walking and all that stuff, and then going from that to, I think I wore an Orion 3 knee, which was another microprocessor. It just seems the more the years go on, the technology just gets crazier and crazier. So like now I wear an X3, which is like top of the line,
Yeah.
microprocessor knee. And I mean, I can have the knee bent, put weight on it, and it hold me. Like, so it's like when I'm working in the lab, because I work in prosthetics. So if I'm at the grinding machine or whatever, I
It
can put weight
sounds
on
like
it.
someone's building a leg right now.
Yeah, exactly. So they can, I can put more weight through my prosthetic and not have to put so much on my sound side where it's been beat up just from the years of playing basketball. But yeah, and then as far as feet, like I've broken tons and tons of feet.
I bet.
But I wear the Explorer foot through Ulcer, and it's a great like walking foot for every day, lightweight. And then I use a different setup now. I have the luxury now where I have a different setup to play pretty much an everyday leg and then a basketball leg.
Yeah.
That way I can switch them out. Because before I was just playing in one setup because I didn't have the luxury at that time.
And now that you're working in the field, I mean, what does your day look like in the prosthetic world?
Yeah, so I'm a prosthetic assistant, and then I help with tech stuff too, technical work. So I'll get to work 7:30, 8 o'clock, and then I do a lot of patient care, like follow up care. So I work closely with a prosthetist. He's a really cool guy, really talented. We have two prosthetists here that are extremely good. So I'm kind of under them, but any follow ups, adjustments, stuff like that, like I'll mainly see most of them, so I get to know the patients really well, and it kind of gives them an ease because they let me wear shorts here. So when I walk in as an amputee, it just kind of I get that a lot where they just feel a lot better that they can relate to somebody, when they're because they don't know how to describe like this is hurting or this is what I'm feeling. I can kind of like get what they're saying without them having to really explain it in detail.
And I'm assuming you visit with brand new baby bird amputees.
I go to the hospital quite a bit for shrinker calls. So if we get an order, I'll go to the hospital. I'll fit a patient with a shrinker like 2 days after surgery. And then, have that visit with them just to kind of ease them up a little bit and answer any questions they may have. And then we try to follow up with them, a couple weeks out. So I initially make that contact, yeah, pretty much right when they're out of the hospital or still in the hospital.
And is any of that for you, because you seem like a spiritual guy, is any of that challenging for you? I mean, people are post-op. I remember that space specifically, and I do remember when you just said shrinker call. I remember that day, and
Yeah,
that was I was in pain at that point, physical pain.
right. No,
Um,
for sure. Yeah,
and I do recall my parents were in the room, and the gal came in and she's like, okay, well, you've got to get used to, wearing this. This is going to bring your swelling down. This is going to be your friend for a while.
right.
And it was one of those 1, 2, 3, and they, put
Yeah.
it, put it on.
Hmm.
And my father said to me later, he goes, the look on your face when they pulled that over your residual limb, he goes, I thought your head was going to explode.
Yeah.
I
Some of them go
mean,
really well. Some of them can be challenging for sure.
so, I mean, you being in that space now, I mean, gosh, full circle, right? Kind of a full circle kind of
Yeah, I mean, I
situation.
never thought I'd be in this field. Obviously, I want to be the athlete, but I mean,
Yeah.
the more my eyes were open to stuff, and I mean, I don't know. I think God's got me here for a reason. I've
Yeah.
survived all this. I've done everything, so I mean, it makes sense for me to be in this field.
Totally.
Yeah, maybe an assistant, a technician, but there's a lot I can bring to the table and help with, and they appreciate me a lot here, which is always nice,
And
and
I think you're
just the
right.
connection with the patients.
Yeah, I think you're right about the connection, because had that person that came to see me, had they been an amputee, I think that would have really brought the temperature way down in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like we were talking earlier, it's hard for me to see stuff like that or take compliments, but I mean, the times that it does hit me is like we have a guy that I didn't see him in the hospital, but I saw him shortly after, that at the office.
Yeah.
And so we've fit him, got him fitted, he had his first leg, struggled with it a little bit. We've done I do a lot of his follow-up care. Got him in a new socket because he shrunk out of it. Got him the new foot upgraded, all that, and now we work out together on Wednesdays because I started a little adaptive group, and so he's doing that.
That's so
And
awesome.
so he's back riding his bike, all that stuff. But he came in for a follow up, and we're just talking about the weekend, and then he just I don't know, for whatever reason came over him. He just wanted to thank me, and then he started crying like a big guy. Just started crying, and he's like, "It's
Yeah.
because of you, and you and an amputee, you can relate." And just always be, because he would text me like, "Hey, like something's not right. Can you squeeze me in?" I'm like, "Yeah, we'll get you in." That type of stuff. That's how we
Yeah.
operate. And so I would always try to get him in because I know, like, if something goes wrong with your leg on a Friday, you got to deal with that over the weekend.
Yeah.
And that's a long weekend until you can get in Monday.
Yep.
So I would always get him in if I could. So I don't know, just for him to break down like that and hug me, appreciate it. Like that's when it kind of hits me like, man, like, yeah, this is like God has me here for a reason.
Yeah. This is why I'm here.
He's kind of showing me. So yeah.
Yeah. Isn't that beautiful? Like, just to share that moment with someone and for them to
Yeah. Yeah.
feel connected to you for those reasons, right? Because, an amputation is it's so life-changing. And although we can, we end up on the other side of that, I feel very confident now as an amputee, and I
Yeah.
have a very full life. And I would even go as far to say fuller than I've ever been in my adult life. I'm
Yeah.
fitter than I've ever been in my adult life because I'm an amputee. Because
Right.
so
Yeah.
much of my success was hinging on um, a really, really, really supportive team of practitioners and assistants and different people saying, man, if you want this to work, you got to up your game. You have
Yeah,
to.
definitely.
You know,
Yep.
it's one of those realities, because very often I'll be contacted by newer amputees, who follow what we're doing, and the first question I always ask is, what is your support system like?
Mm.
And what's your situation? And if I detect that they are, let's say, had mobility issues or uh, comorbidities, let's say that their fitness level is, very poor at this stage. It's hard. It's very difficult to try to encourage someone post-op. Um, yeah, man, like you've got to really commit yourself to this physical endeavor, because
Mhm.
especially as an above the knee, the amount of energy necessary to move.
Yeah, it's a different
Um,
ball game for sure.
it's a very different ball game. And I took up, I love riding bikes as well. I took up pickleball recently.
Nice.
And when I was a younger guy, I played tennis, but in my mind, I'm like, oh, pickleball, it's like teeny tiny court, and oh, it'll be easy, right? I'm like, holy cow.
Yeah.
Because, you know, you can, as an amputee, you can master things like walking, stairs, riding a bike. Um, and I sort of, it's nowhere near basketball, but I sort of compare it to basketball, just in the sense of all the pivoting, all the turning. You're creating movement that is not necessarily natural,
Right,
but it needs to be very fluid in order to be successful, right?
right,
Because when I
right,
look at like professional basketball players, when I watch videos of you, it's almost artistic. Like, it's very beautiful the way that you move, because it's sort of like water, right? You're just,
right.
you're sort of like snaking, through opponents, and all of it is it's very fluid. So the first thing I noticed about myself on a pickleball court was I was like very jerky, right?
Sure.
Because
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure out how to move. Because in my
Right.
mind, I'm like, oh, I'll just kind of like, go left or right. I never considered like the forward and the backward, or the
Yeah.
having to like spin
Turn. Yeah.
around. And oh man, I was so, I mean, and I've gotten better at it, and I'm proud of that. But, when I started, it was, oh man, was I sore. I mean, I was using
Yeah.
muscle, because you get confident, right? Like, I can walk and I can ride a bike, and then you play literally like an hour and a half of pickleball, and I can't move. my
Yeah.
whole my whole body. I'm like in traction. But yeah,
Yeah.
I would imagine that there's a lot of, very full circle moments, that affirmation of, I'm in the right place. This is where my paths have led. I'm serving this community in a completely new way, but a very gratifying way. And, still fueling your charitable efforts. And tell me about you being an author, because I thought I read something, saw something. I want to say it was a social media post about a book, um, but I didn't do a deep dive on it. Can you walk me through that a little bit?
Yeah. Back in 2011, I did write like a little biography type thing. When This was when AMP1 was kind of getting going. That was a long time ago, but probably what you saw was, I want to say, maybe
Well, it's
4
a
years ago.
children's book, I think.
I wrote a children's book. Yeah,
Okay.
I had always had people ask me or tell me, you need to do a children's, just because of everything I do with kids. But I put it off just because I was like, I can't write a kid's book. Like, I just didn't think I could do it. And then again, I meet a kid and his family, and I don't know, I just felt like, all right, I need to do this after I met with them. And so I started writing it, and then I was like, I don't want it to be about my story. I need to have like a message with it. Like,
Yeah.
I just don't want it to be my story in a sense. So I started it, and then I stopped for like a few months, and then I was driving to work one day, and then the message of the book just kind of hit me,
Yeah.
and then I was like, yeah, this is what it needs to be. Because the message kind of goes along with being an amputee and sharing that story, but at the same time, it coincides or aligns with my faith and who I put my trust in, and how that kind of it's almost identical to learning to walk with a prosthetic. So I finished the book out, finished the story, and then I was like, I'm not a drawer. I need to find somebody to draw the pictures because I can't do that. And
Yeah.
so couldn't find anybody, and then I just found Christian Faith Publishing, reached out to them, said, "Hey, I had this book," and so it's kind of more of a self-publishing thing. But I had somebody who believed in my story, believed in what I was doing, and so they reached out and they helped me kind of get it published. And so
Wow.
it's been published. I haven't done anything with it. I had a mascot created, so the character that you see in the book, I do have a mascot of that. I had these big plans, visions of it's going to go to these schools, churches, whatever, share the message and
Well,
all that,
how do we find
and then
this?
COVID.
How do we get our hands on this? Is there a way to get it on Amazon or anything?
It is on Amazon. It is on Amazon.
Okay, so
And then
what's the
I
name of the
have it on
book?
my website too. Me and JC.
Me and JC. Okay, and we can
Me
get it
and
on
JC.
Amazon. And
Yes.
you are the published author, Scott Odom,
Yes.
of this book. Yeah, because
Yes.
we need to, put some energy behind that too. Let's get that out there. I mean, that's
Yeah, I
amazing.
appreciate it.
No, that's
So
wonderful.
I go to the kids camp every summer that I'll go to. So I end up buying a lot of copies myself, and then I'll just give them out to kids.
Oh, wow. That's so
That's
sweet.
kind of what I do, just because that's the reason I wrote it. Really was for them.
Yeah, of
And
course.
so yeah, I've probably sold like the friends and family, but yeah, nothing ever came of it. Which again, I kind of beat myself up a little bit, like are you really an author type thing? But at the same time, I'm like, I didn't write it for everybody. Like I wrote it. So the messages or the comments I get from these families that are going through cancer or limb loss,
Yeah.
telling me how their kids really enjoyed it or how much it meant to them. Like, that's all worth it to me. So I just did what I felt he was calling me to do for a long time, and I just put it off. And then when I finally did it, I'm just trying to serve and do, what he's called me to do.
And what is the website for the charity so the audience knows?
It's abisports.org.
ABIsports with an S.org.
Yes.
Got it. No, that's phenomenal. And what is the preferred way that if anyone wants to support your endeavors, you prefer to be contacted? Is it through the charity email?
That's fine. And then somebody finally convinced me to do a website because I was doing speaking at the time. I haven't spoken years, but I do have my own website that kind of has the book on there and kind of all the other stuff I've been a part of.
And what's
So
that?
I do have my ScottAodom.com.
ScottAodom.com. Well, you're incredibly, doesn't surprise me, because like I said, I have been researching you. You're an incredibly humble guy, uh, given, your life story, your journey, what you've been through, and how you have taken that and used that in such a positive, incredibly positive way. And to be able to give yourself to the community, to children, and all of us that need, you know, that forward movement, um, is just remarkable. And to top it all off, like I said, you're incredibly humble about it. I feel like I'm like having to pull, those those website addresses out of you.
Yeah.
Most people will come on and they're like, go to this and go there and do this, and you're just kind of like, yeah, I'm
Yeah.
just trying to do my thing, and I
Yeah.
appreciate that because you're so laid back. But at the same time, kudos, man. Been so much, just incredibly fun and inspirational, to get to know you before the interview. And obviously now, it all kind of comes together, as far as your particular, brand of wisdom and what you represent, in this landscape. So, Scott Odom, thank you so much. Thanks for being on the show. Thank you for the work that you're doing and continue to do. Of course, please reach out to Scott, if there's anything that, would warrant his engagement. As you can tell, he's serves his community incredibly well. Thanks again, Scott. My name is Rick Bontkowski. This is the Amped Up to 11 podcast, and I want to wish everyone health and happiness. We'll see you next time.